Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Exploring the Value Proposition of Modular Construction. My name is Jacob Gorenkoff, and I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Housing Renewal Association. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which I'm currently on in Ottawa is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. And as all of you are joining us today from many places near and far, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to give you a brief run through of the webinar technology, even though I'm sure at this point in the pandemic, you're all very familiar with Zoom. Today's webinar is in real time. You should soon see a title screen of today's first presentation and be able to hear me via your computer speakers, headset, or through your telephone if you've chosen to dial in. As we're in webinar format, you're all muted. If you wish to ask questions, you may type them in the Q&A section on the webinar control panel at any time during the presentation, and we'll address as many as we can once all three of our presentations have concluded and we get to the Q&A period. So as you all know, Canada's supply of affordable housing hasn't been able to keep pace with demand. As a result, many federal capital funding programs, such as the Rapid Housing Initiative, have pivoted to requiring or prioritizing more novel construction methods that can build quicker than traditional methods, particularly modular construction. So today, we're going to be hearing from three great speakers, each offering diverse perspectives on our topic. The first is Rhys Kane, Strategic Sales Director for NRB Modular Solutions. Second is Abigail Bond, Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat for the City of Toronto. And the third is Tim Welch, Principal of Tim Welch Consulting. Welcome to the three of you, and Rhys, over to you.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for the intro. Let's get going here. Okay, how's that? Are we good, Jacob?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to present. I'm extremely passionate, excited about modular housing. So I think I've got about 12 minutes to get through this. So I'll do my best to keep on track and keep going. So my agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about who I work for. I'm going to give an overview of modular construction in general, some ideas on how to get the best from a modular project if you are considering modular, and then just a couple of project examples of some projects that we as a company have been involved with. So yeah, I work for NRB. I'm a sales director. I've been in the modular industry for about 8 years. I've been involved with everything from container-based conversions, shipping container conversions, steel modular, and a lot of wood frame modular, focusing on multi-unit, multi-story affordable housing type projects across the West. I'm also extremely passionate about affordable housing. I sit on the board of directors of a non-profit group here in Calgary called the Elder Statesman Group, which provides subsidized housing for low-income seniors. So it's an exciting place to be and be a part of. So I work for the Dexterra Group. Dexterra is a pan-Canadian powerhouse business, some different business units. Modular is who I work for, NRB. We've also got Horizon North, which some of you may be familiar with the name on the modular side. So Horizon North and Outland under workforce accommodations and forestry and energy services. And
Sorry to interject, Rhys, your presentation is stuck outside of presentation mode on the title screen.
Oh, it's not moving along?
No. There's bound to be one technical glitch.
Let's try. I'll try again, maybe.
You're off to a great start, though.
I have my flow going, Jacob. Let's try again. Okay, are we on the Dexterra page?
Yeah. Yeah,
Perfect.
It's not in presentation mode, though.
It's on. Which one is it on? Sorry.
It's stuck just outside of presentation mode, but it's on the Dexterra page.
Okay. So are we on the modular solutions page now?
Yes.
Okay. So modular solutions is who I work for. As you can see from this slide, we do a bit of everything from sort of the education sector, commercial projects, right through to large scale multi-unit, multi-story affordable housing projects, hotels, seniors housing. So a broad range of experience. are we moving on to the next slide here, Jacob?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So you can see from this map here, we've got we're a national business. So we've got 2 factories in the west, one in Kamloops, BC, one in Calgary, Alberta, which is where I'm based. And then out in the east, we've got the Grimsby facility, which is the original NRB facility, which has been around since the late 1970s. So lots of experience there. And then recently opened is the new Cambridge, Ontario factory. So it's a state-of-the-art, 150,000 square foot modular facility built to really for the demand, this newfound sort of growth and wave of interest in modular in the east. So really exciting times. You can see from the map that we've got a national presence. So we operate across Canada, right across the north and down into the US. So this is just a quick quote to get people thinking. So an estimated 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness every year, and 1.7 million households are in core housing need. And to compound that, efficiency eludes the construction industry. Productivity has plunged by half since the late 1960s. So we've got a real supply and demand issue here. So whereas all the other major industries have really benefited from, software and technology improvements and robotics and automation, every other industry has seen a rapid increase in productivity. The construction industry has actually seen a decrease over the last 50 years, believe it or not. We're still doing it the same way we always have done. Lumber turns up on site, people turn up in, out in the elements and bang nails and build buildings. So we haven't seen those productivity gains. So that's why a lot of people are really looking to offsite and modular technologies for building. So what is modular? So what we do is full 3D volumetric modular construction. So modules are fabricated in our temperature control facilities. They're typically completed to around 90% complete with all the interior finishes. So we do the painted drywall, the kitchens, the bathrooms. The modules on the interior are complete. They're full, like apartment or studio units, whatever it is that we're building. And really we're getting even the furniture is put in there. The window coverings, I joke sometimes we'll even put the toilet roll on the holder. So the idea is that we get these modules complete to as much as possible. At the same time, the site's being prepared. So the site works, site improvements and foundations. And once the modules are ready, they're then transported to the site, crane and set on the foundation, and then the final interconnections, exterior siding and roof is all completed, so that the building is completed in that fashion. Modular uses all the same materials as conventional construction. Lots of people ask, is it a different building code? But it's not. It's exactly the same building code and standard for a permanent modular building. And when complete, the structure is indistinguishable from conventionally built alternatives. The trick is, whoever's living in it or looking at it, if they weren't told, they wouldn't really know how it was put together. A modular really is an ideal solution for affordable housing. Affordable housing has a lot of element of repeatability and scale and economies of scale to it. So it really is a good fit for this sort of factory production of units. The biggest benefit with modular is the speed with which a modular project can be completed. So an expedited schedule is typically 30 to 50% faster with a modular project. In BC, we've seen as much as 70% quicker than conventional. Obviously, with affordable housing, getting people housed in a quick fashion, you see these projects take 2-3 years to come together. With modular, we can really bring that forward, which is a huge benefit to the program. And also all the other benefits that come with an expedited schedule. The reduction in schedule means that you're not exposed to change orders and winter conditions or things that may escalate over the period of a 2-year construction cycle. We can really condense that so you're not exposed to those risk elements. So it's quicker, it's faster, it's better in many ways because of that. Another big benefit for affordable housing with modular is that the units are a lot quieter. You get a different wall assembly and floor assembly with modular, basically a thicker wall assembly with an air gap. So when it comes to affordable housing, obviously we're building a lot more density these days, so apartments and row housing. So the quality of these buildings where you're not hearing people walking on your ceiling, you're not hearing the family living next door, so you're getting a lot more privacy. So it's a much nicer place to be. Obviously also a huge sustainability improvement. So a conventional construction project can typically produce 30% waste per project, whereas with a modular project, you're reduced to down to as much as 2% waste. So some things to think about with modular is it's slightly different, some different considerations when you're thinking about doing modular. So here's just a few steps that you should be thinking about. Step one is really research and pre-qualify the industry. So the modular industry is quite diverse. So really think about the type of project that you're doing. If you're doing a 4-story apartment building, go and find companies that have done that type of project before, ask for examples, and think about working with those companies. Really good advice is to really commit to the concept of modular very early. You don't want to go and design a stick-built building and then think, hey, I might consider modular for this project. It won't work. It won't be effective. You've really got to think about modular from the outset, think about the design considerations, lining up walls, chase locations, and then you'll get a much better product at the end. You can actually convert back to stick later if it doesn't work, but doing it the other way around doesn't work as well. Put a lot of emphasis on early collaboration and collaboration at every stage. So get everyone to the table as early as possible, all the stakeholders. This is a really good process that you're making these decisions early and really design with modular in mind from the outset. So work with the factory, work with modular experts. Other critical differences, just things to think about. One of them would be procurement. The traditional sort of design, bid, build doesn't really work for modular. You've got to think early of design, thinking about an RFP specifically for modular. Lots of modular projects go through design build. So when you're thinking about contracts for modular, just talk about the modular industry, see what kind of contracts work, think about some different alternatives. And then lending on modular is something else to think about for modular projects. Most of it's down to the expedited schedule. Lenders are typically putting construction draws out over a 2-year period, and then they're suddenly expected to put them out over 6 or 9 months. So it's not insurmountable, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a matter of thinking about that as early as possible and getting them engaged. Okay, as it relates to our experience, in the West, most of our experience is related to BC Housing. So BC Housing back in 2017 created the Rapid Response to Homelessness program. They had a housing target of 2,000 units using modular construction across both the temporary and permanent program. NRB is proud to have been part of more than 40 builds, building over 1,500 units with them. The original project, I put this in here because I think it's a really good one to take a look at if you are interested. There's a lot of information out there to do some research. So the Terminal Avenue project was the pilot project. Every good program starts with a good pilot. Lots of high profile interest, but lots of political will, kind of similar to what's happening in Toronto right now. This project was the first announced under the CMHC Innovation Fund, so many firsts for this project. There's a nice picture of that one. And then what formed out of that was a large scale program that could be replicated and repeated across multiple sites. So this is our current iteration, that's called the Ash Street project, but a good example of what a 3-story building on a temporary location. This is all studio units. And then a good example more on the apartment style is a project down in Grand Forks. So this is, like I say, more of the apartment style. It's on a concrete foundation, has a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bed apartment units with balconies, also some townhouse row housing on the site. So it shows the flexibility that modular can offer in terms of everything from a studio supportive housing project right through to an apartment style family row housing type project. This map here shows the extent of the program that we've completed across BC, and we've got many more in development right now across the province and out in the east in Toronto too, which I think Abby will speak a bit more about. Another initiative to look out for, we're very excited about a rapid housing initiative. There's obviously a lot of funding going into rapid deployment of new construction projects. So anything new construction is all about the rapid delivery. So from what we understand, the funding commitment is from funding commitment through to substantial completion is 12 months. So I've talked today about how modular can provide an expedited schedule. So CMHC is really looking to modular. So it's a really good government initiative, another program that really pushes to the modular to the forefront, considering the energy efficiency requirements and accessible design. Something to think about. So we're really excited about this program for modular, and if anyone wants to talk to us about that, we'd be very excited to do that. So that's my presentation covered. Thanks, Jacob.
That was great. Abby, over to you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Reese, for making a good start. Okay, I will also be sharing my screen. Just bear with me a minute. Okay, hopefully someone can give me the thumbs up when you can all see that.
Looks great.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to just tell you who I am. I'm Abby Bond. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat at the City of Toronto, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we've been using modular housing to create new supportive housing in our city and really address some of the challenges that we're facing around homelessness. So like Jacob, I also just want to acknowledge the land that I'm standing on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I also want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaty, signed by multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Again, very important for us to acknowledge our Indigenous peoples, and our work with them is clearly not done yet, and we need to do more, especially in this area around affordable housing and homelessness. So one of the things I just want to mention is that even before COVID happened, we had an affordable housing crisis in Toronto and real issue around homelessness. But when the pandemic hit, what it really did for us is change the value proposition of our shelter system. And because we had to create more social distancing, almost overnight, the cost of our shelter system almost doubled. Now, we've received financial support for that from the federal and provincial governments, but what it did do was really force us to look at how we could expedite housing as a much better alternative, not just for the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, but also for the taxpayer and those people who are funding affordable housing. So we started to make a pivot towards supportive housing. And again, as I said, we're experiencing a homelessness and housing crisis. Last month in June 2021, we saw over 700 new people become homeless in Toronto. And these are just the people who we're connected with through our shelter system. And last month we housed, you can see from this chart, around 253. So we're just not providing sufficient housing quick enough for people to exit through the shelter system into housing. So a really urgent issue that we're trying to deal with. And as has been previously stated, housing can be a multi-year process. If you're trying to do something fast, you have a number of challenges. So we also looked at modular housing as a way to really provide both a rapid but a dignified response to homelessness. And so we looked at prefabricated modular housing as a way for us to deliver supportive housing, because a home with wraparound supports is one of the best ways to address homelessness. We knew that we could do this faster and at a lower cost. We began this process in Toronto back in April of 2020, so right on the heels of COVID-19, and we opened our first building in December of 2020. So that is one of the fastest turnarounds that Toronto has ever seen for a new building, a new affordable housing building. And here you have on this slide a picture of Darren as he's moving into his new apartment. Thrilled. He's got a self-contained unit with a kitchen, bathroom. He's got access to amenities like laundry, and he's got staff on site to really support him in his transition out of homelessness. So here are some pictures of some of the other buildings. The two buildings we opened in 2020 were at Macy and Dovercourt. There's lots of information on our website about those two buildings. And we're now embarking on a number of other buildings across the city. So that was just like the first wave, funded through Cmhc and the City of Toronto. So very exciting for us. And we continue to see the evolution of the design, both inside and outside of the buildings. So we chose this type of construction as a way to expedite supportive housing. So right now we have about 8 modular housing buildings under development across the city in various stages of either occupied, under kind of approvals, or soon to be under construction within the next couple of weeks. We're looking to deliver over 500 units of supportive housing in this way. For our Toronto residents. And this is part of a much larger effort. As I said, we really try to pivot as a result of the pandemic towards supportive housing. And over this kind of year, we're opening around 1,200 units. Not all of those are modular, some of those are acquisitions as well. But modular has played a really important part of our strategy here to provide the right kind of housing for our residents. So just an acknowledgement that we cannot do this as a municipal government without the support of provincial and federal governments. So choosing the right kind of construction, choosing the right sites, a lot goes into that planning. But a big part of our success has been the kind of funding that we're receiving. And as everybody knows, the federal government recently announced phase 2 of the Rapid Housing Initiative. And I'm sure there are many people out there as kind of scrambling to get their business investment cases ready for the end of August. So it's another $2.5 billion across Canada, aiming to create over 10,000 new permanent affordable homes across Canada. Many of them will be modular housing construction, although there could be acquisitions as well and some traditional construction. And also we saw in Ontario an accelerated build pilot program with 1.75 billion to create long-term care beds, also through rapid construction through modular housing. So both levels of government are investing in this type of construction. So really, just quickly, some of the benefits and challenges, it enables us to be much faster, much more nimble than perhaps we have been in recent years. It's flexible and affordable. You can do a lot of different design tweaking. Most of the homes that we've done are studio apartments, but they don't have to be. We can get really quick results and a lot of value for money. Some constraints that we're seeing is maybe a limit or constraints around manufacturing capacity. Also some education and awareness from both communities and some officials about what modular is and what that means. Is it a second-class type of construction? And so we're always working to point out that this is meeting all of our building code requirements and often going further than that. And we're able to do all of the sustainability features and everything that we would, and meet all of the same standards around accessibility that we would want to see in a traditional construction. And because of the speed, I will just say, because we're trying to move fast, it's actually can be challenging for communities and the engagement process to kind of keep up with the speed of the process. So we're out talking to communities about new modular housing coming to their area, and that process can take 6 weeks. Perhaps what would normally be a 6-month process of showing people designs, receiving feedback, going back, is much more condensed because we're really trying to deliver these homes much faster. So that can be a challenging process. These are my contact details that I'll leave with you in case you have any questions after the webinar. But we're really pleased with the results that we've seen using modular, and particularly the way that we feel we're able to target delivery of supportive homes for those people who really need housing most in our city, so those people experiencing homelessness. And I'll leave it there for now. Jacob, back to you.
Thanks so much, Abby. That was a very informative and efficient presentation. I really appreciate that. Tim, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's see if we can get this on the screen. And let's see. Is that visible or?
Yeah, it's visible. You just want to click the presentation icon close to the bottom right of the screen.
All right. A little better?
Yeah, looks good.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Jacob. I'm Tim Welch from TWC. We're a consulting firm that works with a lot of nonprofit groups to create affordable housing across Southern Ontario. And today we're talking about a particular project in Minden, Ontario, that for those of you who are not familiar with Minden in the township of Minden Hills, it's about 2.5 hours northeast of the city of Toronto in the sort of Kawartha Lakes region geographically in the Canadian Shield land. It's a community of about 4,000 people. There is in small towns as well as across large cities, there's of course a huge need for affordable housing. In Minden in the Haliburton area, the population median age is about 10 years above the provincial average. So it's in the mid 50s instead of in the low to mid 40s typically. So there's certainly a strong need for seniors housing in the community, but also the work we've done in the past. There is not really an active rental market in terms of the private sector. There'd be conversions of existing homes into duplexes, et cetera, but there's not really a private sector, an active private sector market. So this ended up being a really interesting creative partnership that's emerged on this site. A local, I'll say a local community member who's really turned into a philanthropist donated land he owned, which is not that common from a private individual. And it's a fabulous, was able to provide a site for new housing. And he also brought an architect that his offices worked with before, called Williamson & Williamson, to do a good design on the site. But he was not looking to be the operator of housing. So he's teamed up with the local housing corporation, the Kawartha Lakes and Haliburton Housing Corporation, who, as this project has moved along, is now, the land has actually been gifted to KLH. And they will be overseeing the construction and operation of the housing. So in looking at one of the things that was key is trying to get a good high quality living environment. The site has a busy road on one side, but on the other side it actually faces a river, which is not that common for affordable housing. You usually get train tracks, concrete factories as the view in some of the sites historically. So it's a beautiful site, and it's adjacent to a really nice municipal park. What's also important both for the operator and for from a construction point of view in terms of getting high energy efficiency for the long-term lower operating costs. And there was also a strong commitment to try to support the local economy by procuring locally. So what has emerged after some back and forth on designing is to have 36 unit development. It's 9 fourplex buildings is how we've ended up in terms of the development. So quads, 2 units down, 2 units up, and get some good economies of scale. It has been designed to be, it can be a mix of market and affordable, but there is interest, of course, of trying to access the RHI funding. So if we are successful for this project for that, it will be all affordable. What's also important is to achieve that energy efficiency is to build it to passive house standards. So we're combining we've been able to link up with a local builder who had been building smaller scale passive house locally and also panelized. So this is not a full modular. And it's many of the attendees will recall when the Cmhc introduced rapid housing last year, looking at modular or panelization met that. So it's not quite as fast as the product that Reese has in terms of that, but it's still certainly a lot quicker than the traditional build. And again, it allowed us to work with the local builder to make sure we can stimulate the economy locally on that. So the project did apply for round 1 of RHI, and I guess about 90% of those who applied for the project stream was not successful, but we certainly are hoping to be successful in round 2 if anyone from CMHC is listening out there. That, as mentioned, that to try and have a lot of focus with the design, and what's been important in terms of that the passive house builder, Quantum, has done a number of homes in the community, but not a larger scale, such as the 36 unit development. So we've teamed them up with a larger general contractor in the area that has done a lot of building for Kawartha Lakes Housing, and also has had them work closely with the architect to make sure we can get both a good design, but still achieve the economies of scale and use the panelization process. We're also, the factory is only 3 kilometers from the site. So there were concerns early on about, they did explore modular and others aspects, but to have something that would be transporting a few hundred kilometers away was seen to be a concern in terms of some of the costs of that. And again, because the local builder that did the panelization also had the commitment and experience in doing passive house design, that was also seen as a real plus in terms of the long-term operation. So just a few shots in terms of the factory, not quite as large as Reese's operations, but it's been an expanding business locally in terms of the panelization inside, and they have other places to be storing for panels. This was more of a large, another development. This is not the site because we haven't started construction yet on the project, but just to show this panels coming on site and being installed, that we're looking at a time frame of perhaps 4 to 5 days per 4 quads for the 4 units to go up. So again, not as fast as full modular construction, but still certainly faster than traditional stick build. This is the design. Again, we work closely with the architect to have 4 units per, and maybe the next slide can give a little better visual of that. So there'll be 2 different doors to enter on each side of the units. There are 2 bedroom units, 2 up, 2 down, and all the units on the ground level will be accessible. In terms of, again, probably having more of the seniors population living in those. As also mentioned, again, this is just so the modeling in terms of the site has the road on the one side, but has the river view and a slope on the other side, which is really nice in terms of the location on that. So again, it's a really good project to increase the supply of affordable housing and potentially market rental housing in Minden, where there is not really a functioning market because of the small scale of the community. It's a really strong example of a public-private partnership. Brings in the expertise of the local housing corporation that operates over 1,000 units, including a number of units in Minden, and does benefit from the panelization prefabrication. We expect to have the construction completed in under 6 months on the project, and again also has the strength of local economic development. And we're also quite proud in terms of having that combination of prefabrication can go with a really strong design. And that was also very important to all the members of the team involved in this project. And just contact information.
Thanks, Tim. Great presentations, all 3 of you. Really informative. So on that note, we're going to open the floor to any comments or questions. Please type them in the Q&A box on the webinar control panel at any time if you haven't already. So Reese, I'm going to put your sales skills on the spot here. If you were to give an off-the-cuff elevator pitch about how NRB's modular units compare to traditional like stick-built units, what would you say? Yeah,
I mean, good question. The idea, like I made in the presentation, is that the actual end product should be the same. So if you're in terms of how you would feel, so it's indistinguishable from conventional construction in terms of livability. But actually, there's a kind of a stigma with modular from the old days, but modular is nothing new. It's been around for a very long time. Abby's presentation talked about sort of the market conditions and why now, like why are we thinking modular right now? It's the market conditions that are driving that. There were sort of post-war prefabs, right? There's all these different stages of actually modular is not kind of new, but with the investment, with the Cmhc funding and with these programs, the modular industry can sort of start to grow and provide, as to Tim's point, beautiful design, right? High quality buildings that can be indistinguishable. But you do actually get a lot of benefits with modular too. There's a lot of requirement for increased building efficiency, thermal performance, code requirements for passive house or step code 4 MBC. And if you think about, the conventional construction industry where you're, turning up on site and you're out in the elements, you've got to shovel snow before you've even started, or if you're working in an off-site factory-based assembly type environment, you can bring those things into that environment a lot easier, right? You can bring in these new technologies into that controlled manufacturing space. So I hope that helps.
It definitely does. And in follow-up to that question, Abby and Tim, with your experiences, what would you say to add on to what Reese just said about the value proposition in your experience?
Go ahead, Tim.
We're working on a couple other projects that are modular, as well as a shipping container conversion project in terms of pricing. We're not finding dramatic cost savings. I think it's fair to somewhat, I think is what Reese was saying, that you are still having the elements there. You are having some time efficiency, certainly, and that is a big plus in terms of getting people into the units more quickly. but also does limit some of the unexpected things that come up. Although, again, certainly there are probably a larger percentage of unexpected things that come up in the soil, in the ground, and pipe connections than above ground. But it's great to have that limitation. We're also finding in the project that we're working on in Minden, certainly in terms of the limitations of less waste, which of course is a great thing environmentally, in terms of the modular construction process or panelization in the example I spoke of. So those are positive, but I don't think that people are looking at dramatically less costs for it. Although I'm open to any other perspectives on that, but that's what we found so far.
Yeah, I think much of that mirrors, our experience. I think the real focus for us was on time saved from kind of idea or concept to occupancy. And specifically because we were focused on supportive housing. So the faster you can deliver that kind of housing, the more lives you'll save, basically, because there are people living in shelters, living outside without access to a roof over their head, without access to the services and healthcare that they need, which is much easier and more efficient to provide them in a housing setting. And in that setting, they also are able to rebuild their lives, rebuild connections in a much better way. Like, it's really hard to consistently show up to appointments, to hold down a job, to have family and friends when you don't have a home. So for us, it was all about time and how quickly could we do this, and really creating some urgency under this homelessness and housing crisis that we're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Abby. I think, Tim, this question is probably best answered by you. Are there any challenges, particularly in smaller communities, with the municipal approval process for modular development projects? So maybe we'll start with Tim and then go to Abby and then Reese.
One of the things I think that can be a concern whenever a new technology comes in, if the local building inspectors, for example, aren't familiar with it, it does take some time. Again, in our particular example, because there already was a local builder doing the panelization, doing the passive house, they've done a few projects, smaller scale, but a few projects locally, so the building officials are familiar. But I think it does take, and I think that, I mean, in terms of the planning, to start to have that discussion, if you know it's a new technology or a new type of build that hasn't happened in your municipality, whether it's passive house or modular or whatever, you're going to have to take a little bit of time to educate building officials on that if they haven't experienced it before.
Can I just add something quickly to that? Because I think that's really the case. And I don't know that it matters whether you're in a larger municipality or a smaller one. I mean, everyone is trying to build quality housing for our residents, irrespective. And a big, really something that was really helpful, we got our chief building officer involved very, very early in the discussions. We actually had him tour the factory where we were going to be building, the NRB factory in Grimsby, where we were building the modules. And what that enabled him to do was right at the start, think about what that inspection process actually looks like. Because the challenge with modular is you can't open things back up once they're on site. So a lot of the inspections have to be kind of rethought in terms of the timing. And he was able to do that with his team, and they have people who go out to the factory at critical times to actually do the inspection. So that early engagement with the chief building officer and their team was critical to making sure that we could really get those approvals done fast.
Reese, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. I mean, Abby's point there about that early engagement is critical. We try and do that as much as we can. Modular across Canada has a standard rating for modular buildings called CSAA 277. So, it's a nationally recognized certification for inspections for modular buildings. So when those modules arrive at the site, the local building inspector sees the CSA sticker, and then that's a factory approved number, and then they inspect the inspections in between the modules. But great question, because if they haven't seen it before, they still want to understand it, they want to know it. So that's the point about early conversations, making sure they're comfortable with it. You know, we've done hundreds of projects in the Vancouver area now, so it's really well recognized. But if we're going into a new community, that's the critical piece, is that communication early. So
great.
Yep.
Well, we'll stick with Reese for the next question. Reese, can you speak to NRB's ability to act as construction manager on site and deal with challenging site conditions, including civil works, geotechnical considerations, and et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as the modular construction industry grows, I think that will become more and more relevant, because more and more general contractors now are starting to take notice of modular and are wanting to be involved and be a part of it. And I think that will help with the growth. Modular companies typically do the manufacturing. So that scope coordination between the general contractor and the modular factory and the owner is really important. NRB as a business, because we're obviously a bigger company, we actually do full turnkey, full design build projects. But not all companies do that. So I think it's just anyone thinking about modular, that's the key piece, is all the messaging has been around early engagement. So if you're working with a construction manager or a general contractor, get them engaged early, get them talking to the modular company, understanding the finishes and the scope in the factory, and then what the local subtrades have to do on site. Because there is an element, a big element of site construction still. You still got to do all the site works, the foundations, and all the connections when the modules arrive. So I think there's just different delivery methods, and it's about that. I'll say it over and over. It's that integrated, project team approach, which is a good thing, right? We want that. We don't want all the finger pointing at the end. So.
Absolutely. Tim, three-part question for you. So for the Minden project, how are you financing the current remaining work to finish it? Can the windows be opened by the residents for fresh air ventilation? And what's the square footage for the 2 bedrooms, and why are no 1 bedrooms included in the mix?
I'll go in reverse order. The square footage is about 820 square feet for 2-bedroom units. It was felt the Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Housing Corporation just finished 2 projects in the last 2 to 3 years in Minden that featured mostly 1-bedroom units. So there was a desire to try and have more 2-bedroom units available. So again, it's part of, when looking at the whole community, there's still a fairly good mix on that. Yes, the windows are operable. And then for the financing, again, part of this will depend on whether we get the rapid housing funding or not. One of the strengths of working with our local housing corporation is that they have been able on other builds to work through the city in terms of financing through Infrastructure Ontario, which helps, the relationship with the city helps immensely in terms of cash flow. Again, we've had great help in terms of the donor of the land and covering some of the soft costs during a project. Again, pretty unusual in most situations, but that's obviously a fabulous help as well. I know we haven't yet done a modular with Cmhc funding. I know there's been a lot of work going on, and I don't know if Reese or Abby can speak on that. Cash flow is always, for every nonprofit project, is a huge challenge in terms of particularly for private nonprofits. And I know that there's been, I think, a lot of work done, but whether others can speak on what Cmhc's approach in terms of cash flowing for modular. So I don't know if Reese or Abby can talk on that in general.
I can comment in relation to the Rapid Housing Initiative, the City Stream. I would imagine they're doing something similar for the project stream, but I'm not completely sure. But on the city side, the RHI money was actually paid up front. And that was because of the timeframes involved. And so that money was front loaded, which is unusual for government funding. You know, we like generally as government officials to kind of come in when there's a greater degree of certainty, usually kind of building permit, occupancy, and we usually stagger payments across the construction. But for the RHI, it was paid up front.
Yeah, and Abby, just a question related to the 3 that Tim just answered. What's the square footage for the studio and 1-bedroom apartments in your development?
So to date, we've only done, on the modular side, we've only done studio apartments. There are 350 square feet, roughly. And And the reason for that is because we also did do some acquisitions, and some of the buildings that we bought did have 1 and 2 bedrooms included in them. And we see 90% of the people who experience chronic homelessness in Toronto are single households. So when we were adding new sites and we were adding new buildings through modular, in addition to the acquisitions, we focus very much on that studio mix. But obviously, there's nothing stopping you designing a building, as we've seen, that can be 2, 3, 4, as many bedrooms as you want.
Jacob, just to very quickly jump back to the previous question again, just for particular for private nonprofits, if they are not accessing RHI funding and are going modular, it just like everything else, start early in your discussion with your financial institution, whether it's if it's Cmhc, because cash flow juggling is a huge challenge. So to start those discussions as soon as you can, because there may be need to have alternative or bridge financing brought in for some projects.
Maybe I can just add on that. I have heard that as modular is becoming more common, many of the financial institutions are better understanding that modular housing construction is the different cash flow to regular construction, and are realizing that, you know, by the time you get to site, you're, you know, 60-70% done in terms of your investment. And so I'm hearing more and more that that is actually better understood now by the financial institutions outside CMHC. So that's good news. And so the more we do, hopefully, again, this education, sharing information about what it is, what it can do, we'll actually start to see some of the barriers, more of the barriers come down as well.
Yeah, can I comment on that quickly, Jacob? Like that's a great point. Like the more they see, the better. The other thing is that there's actually some positivity to it too. What they like is the fact that it's much more controlled, so it's seen as sort of perceived de-risk, because there's less exposure to being out in the elements and change orders and this long duration. So once they get their head around the speed and that sort of the quicker curve of cash, you know, cash flow, then the de-risk of the project is very attractive.
Absolutely. I want to return to a point that we've talked about a bit, and that's about the speed of modular builds. And Abby, you did a really good job of articulating the importance of the speed and how it saves lives. And given that importance, clearly, we need to make modular a little bit more mainstream still. So just generically, a question to all three of you, what can we do to increase the uptake in modular builds as opposed to the traditional stick build? Oh, it's very pie in the sky.
Maybe I'll start. I think we're actually doing a lot right now. I mean, as we've seen the growing number of municipalities and nonprofit and private organizations who are trialing this, piloting. I think I'm contacted almost on a weekly basis by, you know, someone in a municipality or a nonprofit organization who wants to understand, you know, what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so sharing that information, I think, helps to build the necessary understanding of the important, you know, that integrated team that Reese mentioned, the different approach to approvals, and being ready to deal with the speed. I mean, that's one of the things, everything in the project needs to be faster. Otherwise, the construction actually outpaces the approvals, it outpaces the engagement. So it's an interesting process to go through when you really are trying to do it as fast as possible. Now, not all modular housing is going to be supportive housing, so maybe not all of it has the same degree of urgency, but I think that test, and that's really the test that we set ourselves, was how fast could we do it, we learned so much through that process, and we're really trying to share that as widely as possible. Certainly in the broader region of the GTHA in Toronto, there's a lot of interest and a lot of municipalities looking at modular and supportive housing because everybody is dealing with the same kind of housing crisis. So I think the thing is, keep talking about it, keep sharing information. You know, we're just, you know, we're dealing with our own issues, but actually we have so much in common with other municipalities and other regions across the country. So that's our approach, is just to kind of keep an open dialogue. And I think the other thing is that our program around modular really relied on the provision of city land. So we provided almost all of the sites for this program. So we wouldn't have been able to do the kind of scale without significant municipal support as well, and not just around approvals, but actual land and financial investment as well.
I just echo that the more and more people and organizations see a successful product. I mean, Reese highlighted a pretty wide scale activities in British Columbia. It's still in its infancy, I'd say, here in Ontario, but the more and more people say, okay, this has been built in a variety of communities. It's absolutely important for supportive housing in Toronto. But if we can see examples of family housing in different communities or other single housing in other communities, that it just becomes more widespread and a little more the norm, or one of many options in terms of moving forward that gets wider acceptance. So more examples are needed, certainly.
Yeah, and if I get a chance to just comment on that, you know, the construction industry is extremely established, and it's a difficult industry to change. There's lots of you know, parts with you know, architecture and engineering and procurement, and you know, this is how we've always done it. So the mentality, so you know, those market conditions that we've talked about is kind of the trigger for why there's an increasing adoption for offsite and modular technologies. But it's really these programs that benefit modular, that you know, the RHI, the Create-to, the BC Housing one that we reference, you know. It takes that political will and that commitment, but it also takes the modular industry to step up too. You know, I think Abby made the point that, you know, one of the issues is obviously capacity. So if the City of Toronto says, hey, we're going to go build 2,000 units of modular housing, they got to know that there's the factories available locally to build it. And so the modular industry needs to do that investment. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, because, you know, we as a company want to invest in new factories and new robotics and automation and technology, but we've got to know that we've got the pipeline to support it. So, you know, big scalable programs is what benefits the industry, and the industry sort of following with that investment in technology and keeping up. But it's undoubtedly the way of the future. You know, this is the nature of, you know, factory production of housing, is the way that the industry is going. You know, we've looked at some different technologies, full volumetric, which what I talked about, Tim talked about more of the panelized offsite. There's lots of different cool new technologies. It's you know, adopting them into the construction industry is difficult. So, but it's really getting there, and it's very exciting.
Absolutely, thanks, Reese. So I think we'll wrap it up with one final question, and quite simply, and I'm going to constrain you to one thing, but if you had to pick one takeaway to leave with the audience, what would it be? Whoever wants to go first can go ahead and take a stab at that.
Okay, I'll have a go. The most important thing, I think, for us at the City of Toronto in doing the program that we've been doing is, I think, the level of political leadership that we've seen on this issue. That has been a game changer in terms of what we've been able to do over the last year and what we intend to do over the next few years.
I would, and again, in thinking from different private nonprofits, and as someone that's Reese touched on, the importance of saying, okay, if we are going down this route, let's have a full discussion from the start, and what are all the implications from whether it's building approvals, whether it's financing, and make sure you fully understand the implications of what this is going to mean, what the benefits are, what some of the other things that are different from the traditional build are. So that trying to make that decision early on, once you've sort of looked at the options, say, okay, we want to go modular, we've got to understand all the aspects of it before we move forward with it.
Great. And I think my biggest takeaway always is that commitment to the concept of modular. You know, that full early commitment. You know, you will reap the benefits of modular and the modular delivery method if you commit to it and get all the stakeholders up to speed and get everyone on the same page to do that and do that as a way of delivering your project.
Awesome. Thank you to the three of you. On that note, we're going to wrap up our webinar for the day. Many thanks from all of us at CHRA to everybody that tuned in today, and to Reese, Abby, and Tim for the great and like very efficient and informative presentation. I really enjoyed all three of them. So just everybody in the audience, I'll be sending a follow-up email with a post-webinar survey and a link to the recording of the webinar today. And thank you again, and I hope everybody takes care and stay safe.
Thanks,
you.
Jacob.
Bye.